A 9-year-old girl rushes into St. Clara's hospital during a raging blizzard, carrying newborn twins in her arms. When she reveals who these babies are, everyone begins to cry. Sophie's shift at St. Clara's hospital had been peaceful until that moment, perhaps too peaceful. 23 years of experience as head nurse in the pediatric ward had taught her that the quietest nights often preceded the biggest storms. While organizing patient files at the nursing station, her fingers instinctively brushed the small golden locket she always wore around her neck, an old habit that calmed her during moments of unease. The clock read 11:47 p.m. when the first scream rang out across the hospital corridor. "Please, someone help!" The childlike voice, laden with desperation, caused Sophie to drop the stack of papers she was holding. "The babies, they need help!" Sophie ran toward the pediatric emergency entrance, her white shoes echoing against the vinyl floor. The sight she encountered made her heart pound. A little girl, no more than 9 or 10 years old, was using a makeshift travel bag as a bassinet. Inside it, 2 tiny newborns, still covered in blood, and vernix stirred weakly. "My God!" Sophie exclaimed, already alerting the emergency code on her radio. "I need a neonatal team in the pediatric ER stat." The girl was trembling, her clothes soaked by the rain that had started outside. Her large brown eyes, wide with fear, never left the babies for a single second. "They were just born," the girl said, her voice faltering. "Mom, she said I had to bring them here, that this was the only safe place." Sophie was already guiding the unlikely group into an ER room, her experienced hands quickly checking the newborn's vital signs. To her relief, both seemed stable, despite the precarious conditions of their birth. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, as the neonatal team arrived and began caring for the twins. "Amélie," the girl replied, hugging herself. "And they're my sisters." Sophie took a warm blanket and wrapped it around Amélie, noticing the shivers running through her small body. There was something familiar about the girl's features, about the way she bit her lower lip when nervous, that stirred a distant echo in Sophie's memory. "Where is your mother, Amélie?" The girl swallowed hard, tears beginning to roll down her rain-streaked face. She's in danger. Claire, my mom, said she had to throw them off track, that I should bring the babies here and not tell anyone." The world seemed to freeze around Sophie. Claire. The name hit her like a punch in the stomach, making the locket around her neck suddenly feel much too heavy. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the small golden pendant, revealing a faded photo of a little girl, about 5 years old, smiling with a gap-toothed grin. "Your mother." Sophie struggled to keep her voice steady. "What's her full name?" "Claire Louise Durand," Amélie answered, furrowing her brow. "But she used to have another last name before she met my dad. She never talks about it, only when she's really sad." Sophie had to lean against the edge of the bed to keep from staggering. Claire Louise. Her Claire Louise, who had disappeared 20 years ago, taken away by her ex-husband in a custody dispute that had destroyed her life. The same gap-toothed smile in the photo, now reflected in Amélie's tear-streaked face. "Amélie," Sophie began, her voice barely above a whisper, "did your mother ever talk about her mother?" Amélie finished, her eyes suddenly brightening with a hesitant recognition. "Sometimes, when she's having a bad day, she looks at an old photo. A photo just like that one you have on your necklace." The world seemed to spin around Sophie. Coincidences were stacking up like pieces of a cruel and wonderful puzzle. She watched the twins being tended by the medical team, her granddaughters, my God, her granddaughters, then turned her gaze back to Amélie, who was now studying her with an unnerving intensity. "You're her, aren't you?" the girl asked, her small but firm voice. "The person Mum calls for when she thinks we're asleep. Sophie. She cries your name sometimes, when her depression gets really bad." Sophie felt the tears she'd held back for 20 years begin to flow. "Yes," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "It's me. I'm her mother." Amélie didn't look surprised. She merely nodded as if confirming something she already suspected. "Mum has been struggling a lot," she said, sounding far older than her 9 years. "Ever since Dad died 2 years ago, she's tried to be strong for us." But then she got pregnant, and those men started showing up. What men? Sophie asked, her maternal instincts, both for her daughter and her granddaughters, flaring with alarm. Men in suits? Amelie shuddered. They started following Mom after she found some papers in Dad's old office. She got really scared, said they were things she wasn't supposed to see. That's when we decided to move. Sophie processed the information as she watched the doctors finish caring for the twins. Both were stable, small but healthy. A miracle, given the circumstances. Amelie, Sophie took her granddaughter's hands, noticing the small calluses on her palms, signs of a child forced to grow up too fast. I need you to tell me everything. About your mother, about these men, about the papers. But first, she hesitated, her heart pounding painfully. First, tell me about her. What is she like? What does she love? A small smile appeared on Amelie's face for the first time since her arrival. She's the strongest person I know, she said with obvious pride. Even on bad days, when she can barely get out of bed, she always finds the strength to hug us and say she loves us. She paints, beautiful paintings, full of color. She says she learned it from someone special, a long time ago. Sophie stifled a sob. Sunday painting lessons, Clare at 5 years old smearing paint on canvases with tiny hands, laughing when Sophie pretended her splotches were masterpieces. She sings to us every night, Amelie went on, always the same lullaby. Something about a secret garden and a golden key. The key to the heart, Sophie finished automatically, her voice trembling. I used to sing it to her every night. Amelie nodded vigorously. Yes, that's it, and she always... The girl stopped abruptly, her eyes widening with a sudden thought. What time is it? Almost midnight, Sophie answered, checking the wall clock. No. Amelie jumped off the examination table, agitated. Mum said if she didn't arrive by midnight, I should hand this over. She reached into the pocket of her soaking coat and pulled out a crumpled envelope. She said it was important, that it would explain everything. Sophie took the envelope with trembling hands. The paper was damp, but the name on the back, written in a handwriting she would recognize anywhere, was perfectly legible. For my mother, Sophie. Before she could open it, an alarm sounded from the nursing station. Shouts and running footsteps in the hallway made Sophie look up, her years of experience recognizing the signs of a serious emergency. Females about 35, found unconscious 3 blocks from the hospital, a voice shouted. Possible postpartum hemorrhage. Sophie's heart stopped for an instant. Beside her, Amelie gripped her hand tightly. It's her, the girl whispered, tears silently streaming down her face. It's Mom. Sophie pressed the envelope against her chest, the locket around her neck heavier than ever. 20 years of waiting, of sleepless nights, of birthdays uncelebrated, all converging at this moment. Stay with your sisters, she instructed, her voice finding a strength she hadn't known she still had. I'm going to take care of your mother. As she ran toward the emergency department, Sophie felt the weight of 2 decades of absence in every step. Her daughter was coming back to her. But at what cost? The envelope in her pocket felt like it was burning, holding secrets that could change everything, or destroy what little remained. The storm outside grew fiercer, pounding against the hospital windows like a harbinger of what was to come. Sophie took a deep breath, preparing to face whatever lay beyond those emergency doors. After 20 years, she was finally getting her Clare back, even if she had to fight the entire world to do so. The clock struck midnight, and with it, a new story began to unfold at St. Clara's Hospital. A story of redemption, reconciliation, and second chances. A story that had started 20 years ago and was now, finally, finding its way home. The blizzard battered the windows of St. Clara's Hospital as Sophie checked her gear for the 3rd time. Flashlight, reinforced first aid kit, emergency radio. Each item carefully inspected with the precision that only decades of experience could provide. Yet her hands, usually so steady during emergencies, trembled slightly. Doctor. Vasquez, she called to the chief ER physician who approached. Is the rescue team already on their way? Arriving in 10 minutes, Elena Vasquez replied, her dark eyes showing concern. Sophie, Are you sure you want to lead this search? With this weather? She's my daughter out there, Sophie interrupted, her voice catching slightly on the word daughter. 20 years, Elena. 20 years not knowing if she was alive or dead. I'm not losing her again. The doctor nodded, understanding. In 15 years working together, she had never seen Sophie so shaken or so determined. The radio crackled. Rescue unit arriving at the hospital. Road conditions are worsening quickly. Visibility under 30 feet. Sophie finished zipping up the thermal rescue jacket. In the inner pocket, the envelope Amélie had given her remained sealed. There was no time to read it now. Every minute was precious. The last coordinates from her cell phone, said Lieutenant Martinez from the rescue team, spreading a map on the table, indicate she was near the old road by the waterfall. The signal was lost about an hour ago. Sophie knew that area well. The waterfall was less than 3 miles from the hospital, but with the blizzard and the rugged terrain, it would be a difficult search. Her heart clenched at the thought of Clare alone in that cold. We'll divide into 3 teams, Sophie instructed, years of crisis management naturally surfacing. Martinez, your team covers the northern area. Peterson, south. Adams and I will go through the center, following the main road. Sophie, Elena grabbed her arm before she left. Take this. She handed her a syringe. Epinephrine, if we find her. When we find her, Sophie corrected. When we find her. Snow lashed their faces as the team split into the darkness. Their flashlight beams sliced through the night like knives, revealing only a few yards ahead. The wind howled among the trees, carrying promises of an even worse storm to come. Fresh tire tracks, Adams shouted after 20 minutes of searching, his voice nearly lost in the wind. They look like they skidded off the road. Sophie aimed her flashlight where he pointed. Through the falling snow, she could make out skid marks on the asphalt. Her heart raced. Clare, she shouted, her voice echoing into the darkness. Clare! Only the wind's howl answered. They followed the tracks for about 50 yards, until their flashlight beams revealed a metallic gleam among the trees. A blue Renault was partially buried in the snow, its side smashed against a pine. Vehicle found, Sophie reported over the radio, running to the car, approximately 2 kilometers north of the initial point. It's empty. Her hands shook as she inspected the interior. The driver's seat was stained with blood. Not a lot in, but enough to make her stomach turn. On the back seat, an open bag revealed baby clothes and scattered documents. Sophie, Adams called, a few yards beyond the car. Footprints. Through the increasingly heavy snowfall, a trail of footprints led into the forest. They were erratic, as if the person who made them had been stumbling. She's hurt, Sophie murmured, her medical training quickly assessing the situation. Blood loss, possibly in shock. With these temperatures, the search went on for hours, each minute intensifying her anguish. The footprints were soon lost completely under the unrelenting snowfall. The temperature was plunging dangerously, and even with thermal gear, the cold was seeping into their bones. South team returning to base, the radio announced. 0 visibility, critical temperature. North team returning as well, Martinez's voice came through. Too dangerous to continue in these conditions. Sophie felt tears freeze on her cheeks. We can't give up, she whispered, more to herself than to Adams, who remained faithfully at her side. Sophie, he spoke gently, if we go on, we'll get lost too. We need to head back and try again once the weather clears. She knew he was right. Her medical training screamed that it was the logical decision. But her mother's heart shattered with each step back toward the hospital. I'm sorry, Claire, she murmured into the stormy night. I'll find you, I promise. The trek back to the hospital was torturous. Each step felt like a betrayal. On the horizon, the first rays of dawn struggled to penetrate the curtain of snow, bringing the promise of a new day and a new chance to find Clare. Sophie knew she needed rest to prepare for the next search. But first, she had a promise to keep. She had to get back to Amélie and the twins. And there was still the envelope, weighing in her pocket like lead, containing secrets that might be the key to finding her daughter. The blizzard continued its relentless dance outside, as though mocking their efforts. But Sophie Anderson was not one to give up easily. Claire was out there somewhere, and she would find her even if she had to scour every inch of that mountain. Marie Lambert adjusted the thermostat in the makeshift nursery for the third time that hour. Years of experience as a neonatal nurse had taught her that premature babies needed a perfectly controlled environment. But something in her instincts told her the twins' restlessness went beyond mere physical discomfort. "They won't stop trembling," she murmured to herself, watching the newborn's erratic movements. And that cry, "It's not normal." On the other side of the glass, Amélie was asleep on a pull-out couch, her young face etched with worry and exhaustion even in slumber. Marie was still trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours, the dramatic arrival of the girl with her sisters, and now the desperate search for Claire in the blizzard. A high-pitched wail from one of the babies caught her attention. The smaller one, still unnamed, writhed in the heated crib, crying in a way unlike any newborn cry Marie had heard in 20 years. "Dr. Santos," she called over the intercom, "could you come to the nursery? I think we have a situation." The pediatrician arrived in minutes, her experienced eyes quickly assessing the twins. "How long have they been here?" "About 6 hours," Marie replied, consulting her notes. "Their vital signs are stable, but this agitation—" "Neonatal abstinence syndrome," Dr. Santos confirmed what Marie already suspected. "Classic case of opioid exposure in utero." Marie's heart sank. How would Sophie react when she found out? The revelation that her long-lost daughter had a drug dependency would be another devastating blow. A movement on the sofa drew her attention. Amélie was awake, watching them with frightened eyes. "Will you help them?" the girl asked, her voice small. "Mom." She tried to stop when she found out she was pregnant. But it was really hard. Marie approached Amélie, sitting next to her. "How long has your mother been using the medicines?" Amélie finished with a painful maturity. "Since Dad died. At first, they were just sleeping pills for nightmares. Then," she hugged her knees. "Then it got harder. Dr. Santos began the protocol for neonatal abstinence syndrome while Marie stayed with Amélie. The girl took off her backpack, pulling out a worn photo album. "Sometimes, when she's really sad, Mom looks at these old pictures," said Amélie, opening the album. "They're from when she was younger." Marie flipped through the photos with growing interest. One photo, partially tucked among the pages, caught her eye. It was an old picture of St. Clara's hospital, and in the corner of the image— "Oh my goodness," Marie whispered, recognizing immediately. It was Sophie, at least 20 years younger, wearing the hospital's old uniform. In her arms, a newborn baby slept peacefully. "Is that your mum when she was a baby?" Marie asked, showing the photo to Amélie. The girl frowned. "I don't know. Mum never talked about when she was a baby. I only know this picture was always among the others she carries around." Marie studied the image more carefully. The date in the corner matched exactly the time Sophie had lost Claire. Could it be that Claire didn't know? That she carried this photo without realizing it was proof of her true origins? "And those men in suits you mentioned before," Marie changed the subject, discreetly tucking the photo away. "When did they start showing up?" "After Dad died," Amélie replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They said they were his friends, that they wanted to help Mom, but she changed when they came. She was more scared." "Changed how?" "Like she was afraid. She started hiding documents in secret places, said they were important. And then," Amélie hesitated, "then she started taking more pills. She said it was to help her sleep, but I heard her crying at night." A stronger cry from the twins interrupted the conversation. Dr. Santos administered medication, watching carefully for reactions. "Are they going to be okay?" Amélie asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, they will," Marie assured her, though she knew treatment for neonatal abstinence would be long and delicate. "They're strong girls, just like their mother." Morning light began to break outside, the blizzard gradually easing. Marie checked her phone. No news yet from the search team. The photo she'd found weighed in her pocket like a stone. Should she show it to Sophie? How would it affect the search for Claire? "Aunt Marie," Amélie's voice pulled her back to the present. "Do you think they'll find my mum?" Marie hugged the girl, feeling her small body tremble. Yes, sweetheart. Sophie, the search team, won't give up until they do. The following hours were an exercise in patience and hope. Marie alternated between caring for the twins, who were gradually responding to treatment, and comforting Amélie, who had finally fallen asleep again. When Elena Vasquez entered the nursery with a grave expression, Marie already knew what would come next. The team is coming back, Elena informed quietly. The blizzard. It was impossible to continue in these conditions. Marie nodded, her hand unconsciously touching the pocket with the photo. Somewhere out there, Claire was lost, unaware she was closer to home than ever. And now, more than ever, time was against them. How will we tell Sophie? Elena asked, looking at the twins. About the dependency, one thing at a time, Marie replied, her years of experience leading her. First we find Claire, the rest we'll face when the time comes. The snow kept falling outside, more softly now, as though nature itself were pausing to catch its breath. Somewhere in that white expanse, a lost daughter wandered, not knowing she was closer to home than she had ever imagined. The snowfall had paused briefly when Sophie returned to the hospital to switch gear. Her hands trembled not only from the cold, but from 12 hours of fruitless searching. The coffee Elena offered hardly touched her lips before the radio crackled to life. Base, this is Thompson. We've got a tip from a local resident. There's an old hunting cabin about 2 miles from where we found the car. Sophie nearly dropped her cup. Repeat the location. Up the cedar trail near the waterfall fork. The resident said he saw smoke in that direction during the night. I'm on my way. Sophie was already on her feet, gathering her gear again. Sophie, Eleanor grabbed her arm. You're exhausted. Let the team... She's my daughter, Sophie interrupted, her voice cracking. You don't understand. She's my Claire. The ride to the cedar trail was tense and silent. The rescue team's jeep inched through the accumulated snow, every yard feeling like an eternity. Sophie kept her eyes on the forest, searching for any sign of smoke or movement. There! Thompson pointed after 20 minutes of climbing. A thin thread of grey smoke rose among the trees. Sophie's heart pounded. Stop here! We don't want to frighten her if she's still alive, she completed in her mind, immediately pushing the thought away. They approached the cabin cautiously. It was an old structure, partly covered in snow, its windows boarded up with weathered planks. One window was broken, recently, judging by the fresh shards on the snow. Claire? Sophie called, her voice trembling. Claire, are you in there? Silence. Thompson tried the door, locked. We'll have to... Sophie was already moving toward the broken window. Claire, if you're inside, answer me. A weak moan came from within. Sophie didn't hesitate, ignoring Thompson's protests. She hoisted herself through the window, shards of glass scraping her thermal gloves. Inside, the cabin was dark and cold. The little light that filtered in revealed a sparse room with furniture covered in dust. A dying fire smoldered in a makeshift fireplace. Claire? Another moan, even weaker, came from a dark corner. Sophie aimed her flashlight and her heart stopped. Curled beneath a thin blanket, trembling violently, was a young woman. Her face was as pale as the snow outside, and her lips had a frightening bluish tinge. But Sophie would recognize those features anywhere. They were the same ones she saw every morning in her locket. Oh my God! Sophie ran to her, dropping to her knees. Claire, honey, can you hear me? Claire's eyes opened slightly, unfocused. Cold. I know, sweetheart. I know. Sophie was already checking her vital signs, her medical training kicking in automatically. Thompson, I need the medical team here, now. My babies, Claire murmured, trying to move. Amélie. They're safe, Sophie assured her, clasping her freezing hand. Amélie brought the twins to the hospital. They're okay. A sob escaped Claire's lips. No, I couldn't let them. No one's going to take them, Sophie promised, as the medical team broke down the door and rushed in. You're safe now. The next few minutes were a blur of professional activity, severe hypothermia, possible overdose, dehydration. Sophie rattled off the symptoms mechanically while helping ready Claire for transport. They were lifting Claire onto a stretcher when it happened. Her eyes opened again, more focused this time, and found Sophie's. For a moment, Time stood still. I know you, Claire whispered. Sophie felt hot tears on her cold cheeks. Yes, sweetheart, you do. Your eyes. Claire struggled to stay conscious. They're like mine. We have to move her now, one of the paramedics cut in. Her temperature's critical. Sophie nodded, snapping back into professional mode, but as she helped carry the stretcher through the snow, her mind whirled. Claire recognized her. On some level, even after 20 years, something inside her recognized her mother. The rescue helicopter landed in a nearby clearing, its blades kicking up a flurry of snow. As the team prepared for takeoff, Claire weakly squeezed Sophie's hand. "Don't leave me," she murmured, her voice nearly lost in the roar of the rotors. "Never again," Sophie promised, climbing into the helicopter beside the stretcher. "I'll never let you go again." The helicopter cut through the grey sky towards Santa Clara's hospital, each second precious in the fight against time. Sophie kept her eyes glued to the monitors, watching Claire's vital signs like a beacon in the storm. "Her temperature is rising slowly," she informed the pilot. 91.8 Fahrenheit. "Still hypothermic, but responding to treatment." Claire drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling disjointed words. "Amélie, the documents, don't let them..." "Shh!" Sophie held her hand, noticing the track marks on Claire's arms. Her heart ached, another battle they would have to fight. "It's okay now." They touched down on the hospital's helipad to a full emergency team. Elena Vasquez led the group, her eyes showing both relief and concern at Claire's condition. "Trauma room 1, Elena ordered as they rushed down the corridors. "We need to raise her body temperature gradually. And Sophie..." She hesitated. "Maybe you should..." "Don't even think about it," Sophie cut her off, her voice leaving no room for argument. "I'm not leaving her alone." The trauma room burst into activity. Warmed blankets, IV fluids, monitors beeping. Sophie moved with the team in a synchronized dance, years of experience allowing her to shift seamlessly between the roles of nurse and mother. "Pupils are reactive," reported a resident. "Oxygen saturation improving." "Toxicology tests," Elena ordered, noticing the same signs Sophie had. "And prepare a dose of..." "No!" Claire suddenly screamed, her eyes snapping open in panic. "No meds!" "Claire!" Sophie leaned over her. "We need to treat the withdrawal. It's dangerous if..." "I can't," Claire cried, gripping Sophie's hand. "I can't go back to that." "My daughter's..." "Okay," Sophie soothed, exchanging a meaningful glance with Elena. "No opioids. We'll try a different approach." The following hours were a roller coaster of emotions. As Claire's temperature normalized, other symptoms set in. Tremors, anxiety, pain. The onset of withdrawal piled atop the effects of hypothermia. "Sophie," Eleanor called her aside after they stabilized Claire, "we need to talk." In the hallway, out of earshot of the team, Eleanor was direct. "You know when the hospital board finds out..." "That she's my daughter," Sophie finished. "Yes, I know. Conflict of interest, ethical concerns, all the protocol." "It's not just that." Eleanor lowered her voice. "Signs of prolonged opioid use, track marks. Sophie, if anything illegal is involved..." "She needs help," Sophie interrupted. "Not judgment." "Agreed. But we have to do this the right way, for her and for the children." Sophie nodded, running a hand over her exhausted face. "Amélie, I need to talk to her. She deserves to know the truth." As if summoned by mention of her name, Amélie appeared at the end of the corridor, accompanied by Marie. Her large eyes immediately found Sophie's. "You found her?" she asked, her small voice carrying both fear and hope. Sophie knelt down to Amélie's level. "Yes, sweetheart. We found your mum. She's sick, but she's going to be okay." "Can I see her?" "Soon," Sophie promised. "But first, there's something I need to tell you." Marie took the hint, guiding Elena away to give them privacy. Sophie led Amélie to a small waiting room, her heart pounding. "Amélie," she began, removing the locket from around her neck. "Have you ever seen a photo like this?" The girl took the pendant, her eyes widening as she recognized the image. "Mom has one just like it. She always carries it." "Because this photo," Sophie drew a deep breath, "is of your mother when she was little. And the woman with her is me. Amelie looked from the photo to Sophie, confused. So that means... It means that I'm your mum's mother, Sophie explained gently. I'm your grandmother. The silence that followed felt endless. Amelie studied the photo, her fingers tracing the outlines of the smiling faces. That's why your eyes look like hers, she finally said. And like mine, too. Sophie felt tears escape. Yes, sweetheart. But why weren't you together? Why didn't Mom ever talk about you? The question Sophie had dreaded, how to explain 20 years of forced absence to a child. It's complicated, she began, but what matters is that we're together now. And I'm going to take care of all of you. Amelie surprised her with a sudden, tight hug. Mom used to cry looking at that picture, she whispered. Now I know why. Sophie hugged her back, feeling the weight of 2 decades of separation begin to dissolve in that small moment of connection. An alarm sounded in the trauma room, followed by raised voices. Sophie stood immediately. Stay with Marie, she instructed, already running back to Clare. I'll be right back. Clare was agitated, struggling against the soft restraints the team was trying to apply. No, I can't stay. They'll find... Clare. Sophie held her face in her hands, forcing eye contact. Look at me. Look at my eyes. For a moment, the panic subsided. Clare stared back at her, something old and deep passing through her feverish gaze. Mom, she whispered, before her eyes closed again. Sophie felt the world stop. One word, one single word, carrying 20 years of absence, pain and love. Silent tears streamed down her face as she held Clare's hand, feeling her breathing finally calm. Outside, the sun was beginning to break through the clouds, melting the snow that had kept mother and daughter apart for so long. A new morning dawned at Santa Clara's hospital, bringing the promise of healing, reconciliation, and finally, a return home. Night had fallen over Santa Clara's hospital, bringing with it a deceptive tranquility. In room 507, Clare slept under the influence of mild sedatives, her face still marked by the exhaustion of the past few days. Sophie watched her daughter from the armchair beside the bed, holding a cup of coffee gone cold. You need to rest, Marie whispered from the doorway, but Sophie just shook her head. I can't, she replied, her eyes never leaving Clare's face. Every time I close my eyes, I go back to that day. That day, September 12th, 1998, the day her world fell apart. Sophie was only 16 when she discovered she was pregnant. The positive test shook in her hands as she sat on the cold bathroom floor at school, silent tears running down a face far too young. It's going to be okay, Thomas had promised, holding her hands. Thomas Laurent, with his dreams of medical school and big plans. We'll raise this baby together. Her parents did not share the same optimism. You're throwing your life away, her father shouted, face red with anger. You've barely left diapers yourself and now you're having a baby. But Sophie stood firm. Against all advice, all pressure, she decided to have her daughter. Thomas stood by her side, at least at first. He got a job at the local pharmacy, talked of marriage, building a family. Clare was born on a spring morning, her first cries echoing through the maternity ward at Santa Clara's hospital, the same hospital where Sophie now worked. Weighing 7 pounds, with a dark fuzz covering her small head, she was perfect. My Claire Louise, Sophie whispered, counting tiny fingers. My little warrior. The first months were tough. Sophie juggled diapers and textbooks, sleepless nights and final exams. Her parents, though initially resistant, eventually melted for their granddaughter. Thomas started to change. I can't lose my spot in college, he'd say more and more often. I have to think about my future. Sophie watched him drift away day by day while trying to balance motherhood and adolescence, but Clare was her strength. Each toothless smile, each small milestone convinced her she had made the right choice. Then Thomas got accepted into medical school, and everything changed. I'm taking Clare with me, he announced one autumn afternoon. My parents agreed to help. You're too young, Sophie. You can't give her the life she deserves. No, Sophie protested, holding 5-year-old Clare tighter. She's my daughter, our daughter. But Thomas had resources Sophie didn't. He had influential parents and expensive lawyers. The custody battle was brutal and one-sided. The mother is a minor, his lawyer argued. No financial stability, no adequate support. Sophie fought with everything she had. She sold what she owned, worked 2 jobs, begged for loans. Nothing was enough. The last day still haunted her nightmares. Claire, crying in the back seat of the Laurent car, her small fists pounding the window and calling for her. "Mommy, Mommy, don't let them take me." Sophie ran after the car until her legs gave out, until her voice tore from screaming. But the car disappeared around the bend, taking her heart with it. "Sophie?" Marie's voice pulled her back to the present. "You're crying." Sophie touched her face, surprised by tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. On the bed, Claire stirred fitfully, as though sensing her mother's anguish even in sleep. "I spent years looking for her," Sophie confessed quietly. "I used every cent I earned trying to track them down. The Laurents had moved to France, so people said, but every lead was a dead end." Marie pulled up a chair, sitting beside her friend. "Is that why you chose nursing?" Sophie nodded. "I started volunteering here, in the same hospital where she was born. Then I became a nursing tech, then did my degrees. Every child I helped was like you were caring for her," Marie finished gently. "My last attempt was 5 years ago," Sophie continued, fingers fiddling with the locket. "I spent all my savings on a private investigator. He traced the Laurents to Paris, but when I got there," her voice faltered, "they'd moved again, without leaving an address." The silence that followed was broken only by the steady beep of monitors and Claire's soft breathing. "Did you know she got married?" Marie asked gently. "To Pierre Durand?" Sophie shook her head. "I knew nothing. Thomas, he must have changed her last name. Claire Laurent became Claire Durand, and I—" her voice cracked. "I lost her completely." "But she found you." Marie squeezed her hand. "Somehow fate brought her back." Sophie looked at her sleeping daughter, noticing similarities time hadn't erased. The same face shape, the same delicate nose. And now Amélie and the twins, 3 generations of strong women, bound by ties that even 2 decades of separation couldn't break. "She suffered so much," Sophie whispered. "Addiction, depression, those mysterious men, and I wasn't there to protect her." "You are now," Marie replied, "and she's going to need you." Movement by the door caught their attention. Amélie stood there, eyes heavy with sleep, yet determined. "I couldn't sleep," the girl explained timidly. Can I stay here too?" Sophie opened her arms, and Amélie didn't hesitate to cuddle into her lap. It was surreal how natural the gesture felt, as if they'd done it thousands of times before. "Do you want me to tell you a story?" Sophie asked softly. "About when your mom was little?" Amélie nodded, her eyes bright with curiosity. Marie smiled, slipping away quietly to give the newly reunited family some privacy. "Your mom," Sophie began, her voice full of emotion, "loved to paint. Even when she was very young, she had a special talent. One day, when she was 4, night wore on as Sophie shared memories long locked away. Tales of a bright-eyed little girl who loved colors and music, who danced in the rain and believed in fairies. Tales of a mother too young who, despite everything, loved her daughter more than anything. In her bed, Claire slept, perhaps dreaming the same memories buried deep within her soul. And there, in that hospital room, 3 generations of the Anderson family slowly began to reconnect the threads of a story long interrupted. Morning would find Sophie still in the same armchair, Amélie asleep in her arms, her hand never letting go of Claire's. The pasty, with all its pain and regret, was finally giving way to a future full of possibilities. The morning sun slipped timidly through the window of room 507 as Claire began to awaken. The haze of sedatives lifted slowly, bringing with it awareness and, inevitably, pain, both physical and emotional. Sophie, who hadn't left the room all night, immediately noticed the change in her daughter's breathing. Amélie had been taken by Marie for breakfast, leaving mother and daughter alone for the first time in 20 years. "Water," Sophie offered gently, noticing Claire's eyes opening. Claire nodded weakly, her movement still limited by her frailty. As Sophie helped her drink, their gazes locked, the same shade of green, reflected one in the other. "So it wasn't a dream," Claire murmured, her voice raspy. "You really found me." "Actually," Sophie set the glass aside, "you found me. After all these years." A heavy silence filled the room. 20 years of absence, unanswered questions, and unlived life hung between them like an invisible wall. "I tried to come back," Claire finally said, her hands clutching the sheet. "When I turned 18, but they told me you'd moved, that you didn't want me anymore." Sophie's heart broke. "Who told you that?" "The Lawrence, Thomas and his parents." Claire swallowed. "They sent me to a boarding school in France right after they took me. They said it was for my own good, that you had agreed." "No," Sophie exclaimed, grabbing her daughter's hands. "I never, ever agreed to any of that. I fought so hard to keep you, spent every cent trying to find you." Tears began streaming down Claire's face. "I didn't know, they never let your letters reach me. I found out later, years later, that you'd sent dozens of them." "More than 200, Sophie confirmed, her own voice breaking. "One a week, for 4 years. Then they moved and I lost your trail completely." Claire closed her eyes, painful memories resurfacing. "The boarding school was so cold, not just the weather, but the people. The nuns were strict, and the other girls. They teased my broken French, my accent." Sophie could picture her little Claire, alone in a strange country among strangers. Her heart ached with each word. "Thomas visited sometimes," Claire continued, "always with expensive gifts, designer clothes, as if that made up for—" Her voice failed. "As if that made up for taking me from you." "Oh, sweetheart," Sophie couldn't hold back her tears. "When I was 15, I started searching on my own," Claire said, "using the school library computers in secret. That's when I found some of your letters, hidden in a file in the office. But the address, it was too old. We moved around a lot then," Sophie explained. Trying to afford lawyers, when I finally got a stable job here at the hospital." "St. Clara's Hospital," Claire finished, a small, sad smile forming on her lips. "Where I was born." "Where you were born," Sophie confirmed, gently squeezing her hands. "I could never bring myself to leave. It was as if part of me always knew you'd come back." "How did you meet Pierre?" Sophie asked quietly, trying to fill in 2 decades of blanks. Claire took a deep breath, her fingers unconsciously touching the faded ring mark on her finger. "He was a friend of Thomas in medical school. He started visiting me at the boarding school, bringing books, chocolates. He was the first who really seemed to care about me, not just about appearances." A shadow crossed Claire's face. "We got married when I turned 19. The Lawrence approved. Pierre came from a good family, had connections, and I just wanted to escape that school." Sophie listened intently, her heart clenching with each revelation. "And Amélie?" A genuine smile briefly lit Claire's face. "Amélie was my salvation. When I found out I was pregnant, I swore it would be different, that she would never feel the abandonment I felt." Her hands trembled. "But then Pierre started changing." "How so?" "At first it was small things, stress at work, occasional drinking. Then came the unexplained absences, the lies." Claire closed her eyes. "I found out he was involved in something illegal at the hospital, forging prescriptions, diverting medications." Sophie felt a chill. "Is that how I started with the pills?" "Yes," Claire laughed without humor. "Ironic, isn't it? The daughter who was taken away for lack of stability ended up an addict." "Don't say it like that," Sophie said firmly. "You went through trauma no one should endure. And still, look at Amélie. You raised an incredible girl." Tears rolled down Claire's cheeks. "She really is incredible, isn't she? So strong, so mature. I sometimes forget she's just a child who loves you unconditionally," Sophie affirmed, "who brought her sisters to safety, just as you asked." Mentioning the twins made Claire stir anxiously. "How are they? The doctors? Did they notice?" Sophie hesitated for a moment. "Yes, they showed signs of withdrawal, but they're getting the best care possible. They're fighters, like their mum." Claire covered her face, sobbing. "I'm so sorry. I tried to stop when I found out I was pregnant. I swear I did." Sophie wrapped her in a hug, the first in 20 years. "Shh, it's okay. We'll face this together now." For several minutes, they remained like that, mother and daughter reconnecting through tears and silence. When they finally broke apart, something had changed in the air between them, like an old wound finally beginning to heal. "After Pierre died," Claire continued, her voice steadier, "I thought it was all over. But then I found the documents, proof of a much larger drug ring. Dr. Laurent Thomas was at the center of it." Sophie froze. "Thomas?" "Yes, he and Pierre worked together. When they found out I knew..." Claire shuddered. "They started following me, threatening me. They said if I spoke, Amélie..." "That ends now," Sophie declared, an old strength rising in her voice. "No one will hurt you or my granddaughters again." Claire looked at her with a mix of hope and fear. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I'm your mother," Sophie answered simply, "and this time, I won't let anyone take you from me." A gentle knock at the door interrupted them. Marie came in, followed by Amélie, who was holding something in her hands. "Look what I found in Mom's things," the girl said, approaching the bed. It was the old photo album. Claire smiled through tears. "Come here, sweetheart. I think it's time you learn some stories about your grandmother." Sophie watched her daughter and granddaughter together, flipping through the album, sharing memories, old and new. The past you, with all its pain and secrets, was finally surfacing. And though there were many battles ahead, Claire's recovery, the Laurent threat, the inevitable investigations, at that moment, in that hospital room, they were simply a family reconnecting, healing old wounds with the balm of love and truth. The morning sun now fully bathed the room, as though nature itself celebrated this fresh start. And Sophie, watching her daughter and granddaughter, knew she was finally whole. The circle broken 20 years ago was slowly closing once more. The arrival of social services at St. Clara's hospital came as no surprise, though Sophie's heart still tightened when she saw the two social workers approaching reception. Catherine Dumont, the older of the two, was known for her strictness. Her younger colleague, Rebecca Santos, had a reputation for being more sympathetic. "We're here to assess the Durand children," Catherine announced, her professional tone barely masking her severity. 3 minors, Amélie, age 9, and the newborn twins. Sophie, observing from the nursing station, took a deep breath before approaching. "I'm Sophie Anderson, head nurse of the pediatric unit, and grandmother of the children according to our preliminary report," Catherine added, raising an eyebrow. "A peculiar situation. Peculiar or not," Sophie kept her voice steady. "I'm the closest relative besides their mother. Their mother," Catherine consulted her notes, "is currently hospitalized for overdose and hypothermia with a documented history of substance dependency." "Undergoing treatment," Sophie corrected. "Claire is committed to her recovery." Rebecca, who had remained silent until then, intervened. "We need to evaluate every aspect of the case, Ms. Anderson. The children's welfare is our priority." Sophie led them to her office, feeling the weight of each step. Through the hallway window, she could see Amélie in the hospital garden with Marie, unaware of the storm about to hit. "The medical reports for the twins indicate neonatal abstinence syndrome," Catherine began, as soon as they were seated. "Opioid exposure during pregnancy is extremely serious. The babies are responding well to treatment," Sophie argued. "Our neonatal team..." "This isn't just about medical treatment, Ms. Anderson," Catherine interrupted. "It's about the environment these children will be exposed to. A mother with a drug dependency, no fixed address, apparently fleeing some unresolved situation." "Claire has been clean for 3 days," Sophie insisted. "She's cooperating with the rehab team, attending therapy sessions." 3 days do not constitute recovery," Catherine retorted. "And what about financial stability, housing, family support?" "I have the means. With all due respect, Ms. Anderson," Catherine adjusted her glasses, "your own history of minor custody isn't exactly exemplary." The blow felt like a punch to Sophie's stomach. Of course they'd investigate her past. The teenage mother who lost custody of her daughter now wanted to be guardian to her granddaughters. Sensing her discomfort, Rebecca intervened again. Perhaps we can discuss temporary arrangements while Mrs. Durand completes her treatment. What arrangements? Sophie asked, dreading the answer. Foster care, Catherine stated bluntly. They would likely be separated. It's hard to find a family willing to take 3 children at once, especially with 2 newborns needing specialized care. No, Sophie stood abruptly. I'm not allowing these children to be separated. I won't let you do to them what was done to Clare. Ms. Anderson, Catherine also stood. Your personal emotions cannot... My personal emotions? Sophie let out a humorless laugh. Do you have any idea what happens to children in the system? What happened to my daughter after you all took her away from me? Boarding schools, emotional neglect, trauma. Precisely why, Catherine cut in. We can't risk repeating the cycle. A mother with a substance dependency, a grandmother with a questionable custody record. This isn't what these children need right now. And what do they need? Sophie challenged. To be separated, sent to strangers' homes. Amélie already lost her father, almost lost her mother, and now you want to take away her sisters too. Rebecca cleared her throat softly. There is the possibility of a preliminary hearing, if we can show a concrete rehabilitation plan for Mrs. Durand and adequate family support. How long? Sophie asked. 72 hours, Catherine replied. That's the legal time frame for an emergency custody hearing. Sophie spent the next hours racing against the clock. She made phone calls, gathered documents, rallied her network at the hospital. Elena Vasquez immediately offered to testify to Clare's progress. Marie prepared detailed reports on the twins' care. How do we explain this to Amélie? Clare asked, when Sophie finally told her about the situation. Clare was stronger now, but the deep circles under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Honestly, Sophie replied, sitting on the edge of the bed. She's already been through too much for us to lie now. The conversation with Amélie was painful. The girl listened in silence, her small hands twisting the blanket. They want to take me away from Mom, she finally asked, voice trembling. Not if I can help it, Sophie promised, hugging her granddaughter. We'll fight, sweetheart, all of us. In the days that followed, Room 507 turned into a sort of command center. Dr. Santos, the psychiatrist overseeing Clare's treatment, provided detailed reports on her progress. The neonatal team documented every small improvement in the twins. Judge Ramirez will preside over the hearing, Rebecca informed them, becoming an unexpected ally. He has a history of decisions favoring family reunification, provided there is adequate support. On the morning of the hearing, Sophie faced her own reflection in the hospital bathroom mirror. She had chosen a sober outfit, appropriate for court. The locket with Clare's photo rested on her chest, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Ready? She asked Clare and Amélie. Clare, still using a wheelchair due to weakness, nodded with determination. Amélie clung to her mother's hand as if her life depended on it. The courtroom was packed when they arrived. Catherine Dumont was already there, standing rigidly as ever. Rebecca gave them a small, encouraging smile. Case number 2347, emergency custody of the Durand minors, the clerk announced. Judge Ramirez, a middle-aged man with keen eyes, reviewed the documents on his desk. Ms. Dumont, please present your report, he requested. Catherine rose, her clinical voice echoing in the room. Your Honor, we have a clear case of negligence and risk. The mother, Clare Durand, has a documented history of substance abuse. The twins were born with withdrawal symptoms. There is no fixed residence there, and there are indications of possible criminal involvement. Objection? Sophie couldn't hold back. Unfounded speculation. Ms. Anderson, the judge gently admonished, you will have your turn to speak. Catherine continued, detailing every problematic aspect of the case. When she finished, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. Miss Anderson, the judge called, I understand you wish to speak. Sophie stood, her heart pounding. Your Honor, 20 years ago in this very court, I lost custody of my daughter. I was young, without resources, fighting a system that had condemned me before I had a chance to speak. She paused, looking at Clare. The result was 2 decades of trauma, separation, and pain. Today, I see my daughter battling her own demons, demons born from that forced separation. But I also see a strong woman who, despite everything, raised an extraordinary daughter. Sophie turned to the social workers. Neglect. I've seen neglect. I've seen what happens when families who need each other are torn apart. Does Claire need help? Yes, she needs support, absolutely. But taking her children away is not the answer. So what is the answer, Ms. Henderson? The judge asked. Time. Support. A real chance to heal. Sophie took a deep breath. I have a home with enough space for everyone. I have stable finances. More importantly, I have 20 years of medical experience and the backing of an entire team of professionals committed to helping this family recover. The judge leaned forward. And what about the past? How do we know history won't repeat itself? Because this time it's different. Sophie's voice trembled with emotion. I'm not a scared teenager anymore. I'm a respected professional, a mother who learned from her mistakes, a grandmother determined to keep her family together. She glanced at Amélie. These children deserve a chance to grow up with love, with support, with their family, not in separate foster homes, not with strangers. The silence that followed felt endless. The judge studied the documents again, his expression inscrutable. This court, he began, cannot ignore the risks, but it also cannot ignore the value of family bonds and the importance of proper support in recovery. Sophie held her breath. Therefore, I grant temporary custody of the minors to Ms. Sophie Anderson under the following conditions. Ms. Claire Durand must complete her rehabilitation program with weekly evaluations. The household will be subject to regular social services visits, and all children will receive ongoing psychological support. Claire sobbed, hugging Amélie. Sophie felt her own tears falling. This is not a final ruling, the judge cautioned. There will be a review in 90 days. Use this time wisely. As they left the courtroom, the afternoon sun bathed the city. Amélie walked between Sophie and Claire's wheelchair, holding both of their hands. Shall we go home? She asked, her voice filled with hope. Yes, sweetheart, Sophie replied, her heart overflowing. We're all going home. The battle wasn't over. There were still many challenges ahead. But in that moment, as they headed back to the hospital to pick up the twins, Sophie knew they had taken the first step in the right direction, the path of healing, reconciliation, and family. The locket around her neck felt lighter now. The photo of Claire as a child was joined not just by memories of the past, but by promises of a future they could finally build together. Sophie's house had never felt so alive, or so chaotic. After 2 decades living alone, her once quiet spaces were filled with the cries of babies, a child's laughter, and the 1,000 little sounds a family makes. Aurora has a fever again, Amélie announced, entering the kitchen as Sophie tried to prepare breakfast. And I think Luna needs a diaper change. Sophie smiled at the names Claire had chosen for the twins, Aurora and Luna, born in darkness but destined for light. Could you grab the thermometer from the bathroom, sweetheart? I'll just finish this baby food. It was the 3rd day since they'd brought everyone home. Claire remained at the hospital, focusing on her recovery, but daily visits kept them close. The twins, still struggling with residual withdrawal symptoms, required constant attention. It's 101.3. Amélie read off the thermometer with the seriousness of a junior nurse. Is that too high? Not for babies this age, Sophie explained, balancing Luna in one arm while checking Aurora with the other. But we'll keep a close eye on it. The phone rang. It was Marie, checking on how they were settling in. Sophie put her on speakerphone while changing Luna's diaper. How's your first week going? Marie asked. Challenging, Sophie admitted, watching Amélie attempt to feed Aurora with a bottle. But we're managing. Have social services done their first visit yet? Tomorrow, Sophie sighed. Catherine Dumont herself. That witch, Marie muttered, making Amélie stifle a giggle. Marie, Sophie scolded, but she also smiled. We have to be prepared. She'll look for any reason. A piercing cry interrupted them. Aurora had spat out the bottle, and now milk covered most of Amélie's pajama top. Sorry, the girl exclaimed, on the verge of tears. I didn't mean to. It's okay, sweetheart, Sophie calmed her, placing Luna in the baby seat. Accidents happen. Let's get you some clean clothes and try again. Marie said goodbye, promising to stop by later with more supplies. Sophie watched Amélie head upstairs, her small shoulders weighed down by responsibility far beyond her age. Hey, she called gently. How about we do something fun this afternoon, just the two of us? Amélie's eyes lit up for a moment, but the worry soon returned. What about the babies? Marie will watch them for a few hours. You've been carrying too much lately, my love. You deserve a break. The change in Amélie's face was immediate. Just for a moment, Sophie saw the 9-year-old child she really was, not the little adult circumstances had forced her to be. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of bottles, diapers, and minor crises. Sophie discovered that years of emergency room experience hadn't fully prepared her for the logistics of caring for twin newborns. How did Mum do this by herself? Amélie asked, during a quiet moment while the babies finally napped. The question hit Sophie like a punch. Clare, battling her addiction, had still managed to keep her children alive and safe. The weight of that reality was overwhelming. Your mum is stronger than anyone realizes, Sophie finally answered. But now she's not alone anymore. None of you are. That afternoon, once Marie arrived to watch the twins, Sophie took Amélie to a nearby shopping center. It was strange to see the child marvel at simple things: an escalator, a fountain with colored lights, the smell of freshly made popcorn. We never went to the mall much, Amélie explained as they ate ice cream. Mom didn't like crowded places. Sophie could imagine why. The constant fear of being recognized, of running into someone connected to the Laurents. Well, now we can come whenever you like. In the bookstore, Amélie disappeared among the children's shelves. Sophie watched her from a distance, noticing how the girl gently caressed the covers, almost reverently. You can pick some, Sophie offered. Really? Amélie's eyes widened. But they're expensive. Don't worry about that. Besides, Sophie smiled, your mum loved to read at your age, too. We had a tradition of reading together before bed. Amélie chose 3 books, all about adventures and mysteries. On the way home, Sophie started forming a plan. You know your birthday's coming up, right? She remarked casually. Amélie shrugged. We don't have to do anything special. Mom always says what matters is being together. What if we have a small celebration? Just family and a few friends. I have friends, Amélie asked, her voice so genuinely surprised it broke Sophie's heart. Well, there's Marie, Elena, the hospital staff, and maybe we can invite some kids from your new school. The mention of school made Amélie shrink back. What if they don't like me? Impossible not to like you, Sophie assured her, though she understood the fear. Changing schools mid-year was already tough. Doing it while carrying a family's secret burdens was harder still. When they arrived home, they found Marie rocking Luna while Aurora slept peacefully. Quiet day? Sophie asked. More or less, Marie laughed. Aurora had some colic, but nothing major. And guess who dropped by? Elena appeared in the kitchen doorway, carrying bags. Brought dinner, and some news from the hospital. Clare is making good progress in the program. While setting up for dinner, Sophie noticed how naturally Amélie moved among the adults, helping without being asked. It was both a source of pride and worry. No 9-year-old should be this competent. I had an idea, Sophie announced during dinner. Amélie's birthday is coming up, and I was thinking of throwing a small party here at home. Not necessary, Amélie began, but Eleanor cut her off. That's a wonderful idea. We can decorate the garden, make a cake, and Clare could join us, Marie added. I'm sure we can get special permission from the hospital. Amélie's eyes lit up at the mention of her mother. Really? Really, Sophie confirmed. It'll be perfect. Over the following weeks, between bottle feedings and hospital visits, Sophie and her friends planned every detail of the party. Eleanor pulled strings to ensure Clare could attend. Marie transformed the garden with lights and decorations. The hardest part was the guest list. Amélie hadn't made friends at her new school yet, but Sophie had an idea. She invited the children of some hospital colleagues, kids who might better understand the family's complicated situation. On the morning of the party, while they finished decorating, Catherine Dumont arrived for another surprise inspection. "A party?" she asked, raising an eyebrow at the decorations. "Don't you think that's premature?" "It's her birthday," Sophie responded firmly. "Every child deserves to celebrate with their family." Catherine made her usual notes, checked the twins, spoke with Amélie. Before leaving, she paused at the door. "You know," she said, her tone less severe than usual, "perhaps I was partly wrong about you." Sophie almost dropped the plate she was holding. "How so?" "The girl is thriving," Catherine admitted. "The babies look healthy, and Claire, well, the hospital reports are encouraging." When she left, Sophie allowed herself a small smile of victory. The party was a success beyond expectations. Claire arrived early, still weak but determined to be part of every moment. Amélie, initially shy around the other children, was soon laughing and playing. "Thank you," Claire whispered to Sophie, watching Amélie blow out the candles, "for giving her what I couldn't." "We're doing this together," Sophie replied, holding her daughter's hand. "One day at a time." Later, after the guests had left and the twins were finally asleep, Sophie found Amélie in her room, organizing her new gifts. "This was the best birthday ever," the girl declared, hugging her grandmother. Sophie hugged her back, tears in her eyes. This was only the beginning, she knew. There was still much to heal, much to build, but as she looked at her reunited family, Claire dozing in the armchair, the twins in their cribs, Amélie in her arms, Sophie realized they were on the right path. The locket around her neck, once weighted with painful memories, now pulsed with the promise of a brighter tomorrow. A future that, though challenging, they would face together. The autumn sun filtered gently through the window of the family therapy room at St. Clara's Hospital. Claire, now 3 months sober, sat on the couch between Sophie and Amélie while the twins slept in their carriers. The fresh smell of coffee from a nearby machine mixed with the fragrance of orchids Sophie kept in the room. Small touches of normalcy in a clinical space. "How are you feeling today, Claire?" asked Dr. Martinez, their family therapist from the start. Her kind eyes took in every subtle change in her patient's posture. "Honestly?" Claire drew a deep breath, her fingers nervously fidgeting with her shirt hem. "Scared. The nightmares came back last night. They were more vivid this time." Sophie gently squeezed her daughter's trembling hand. The nightmares were always a red flag, a sign that cravings might be lurking nearby. Over the months, the family had learned to recognize them. "Could you tell us about the nightmare?" Dr. Martinez encouraged, leaning forward slightly in her chair. "It was about Pierre." Claire closed her eyes, voice trembling. "And the Laurents. They were taking the girls away and I couldn't move, couldn't scream. It was like being trapped in my own body, watching everything happen without any power." Amélie scooted closer to her mother, a silent gesture of support that squeezed Sophie's heart. At 9, the girl showed a level of understanding beyond her years. "Nightmares are your subconscious working through the trauma," Dr. Martinez explained, jotting notes. "They often intensify under stress. Is anything particular worrying you lately?" Claire hesitated, glancing at the twins asleep in their carriers. Luna shifted in her slumber, her tiny face scrunching before relaxing again. "The final custody hearing is coming up," she admitted. "What if I failed? If I can't prove I've really changed?" "You won't fail," Sophie cut in firmly. "Look how far you've come, honey. 3 months clean, actively involved in the girls' lives, facing your demons head on." It was true. Claire had completed an intensive rehab program, attended her NA meetings religiously, and was slowly rebuilding her life. Daily little victories were adding up, waking up to the twins' cries without panicking, making breakfast for Amélie, holding a conversation without her mind drifting to pills. "Sometimes," Claire admitted in a low voice, "when the pain is too much, when the memories won't let me sleep, I think just 1 dose to take the edge off." "Mom," Amélie whispered, her big eyes full of worry. "But I don't," Claire added quickly, hugging her daughter. "I think about the girls, about you, Mom, about everything we've built, and how I feel more present, more real." A soft cry interrupted the session. Luna was awake, followed quickly by Aurora, a synchronicity that still surprised everyone. Claire immediately stood to tend to them, her movements more confident now, more maternal. "I'm seeing great progress in your family dynamics, Doctor," Martinez noted, smiling at how naturally Claire divided her attention between the twins. "Claire, your connection with the babies is much stronger." "It's easier now," Claire admitted, rocking Luna while Sophie picked up Aurora. "Without the fog of drugs, I can really feel them, you know. Every expression, every little sound, it's like I'm finally waking up to life." The session continued, exploring fears, hopes, and plans for the future. When it ended, Dr. Martinez asked to speak with Sophie alone. "The warning signs are still there," the therapist said after Claire and the kids stepped out. "Stress from the upcoming hearing, recurring nightmares, growing anxiety. We must stay vigilant," Sophie nodded, the weight of family responsibility heavy on her shoulders. "I won't let her slip. Not this time." "We know relapses are common in recovery," Dr. Martinez continued. "The key is to have a solid contingency plan." But fate had other plans. 3 days later, Sophie found Claire locked in the bathroom at home, shaking violently, an unopened pill bottle in her hands. "I didn't take them," Claire sobbed when she saw her mother. "I wanted to, God. I wanted to, but I didn't. I couldn't do that to them again." Sophie knelt beside her daughter, gently taking the bottle from her trembling hands. "Where did you get this?" "An old contact. He found me at the market." Claire shivered. "He said it was just for emergencies, that no one had to know. I almost—" "But you didn't," Sophie emphasized, hugging her daughter. "You're stronger than this, Claire, stronger than you realize." "The girls, they needed diapers," Claire explained between sobs. "I thought I could handle a quick trip, that I was strong enough. Then he was there, and all I could think about was how easy it would be to make the pain stop." "Shh," Sophie soothed her like she used to when Claire was small. "You made the right choice. You chose your daughters. You chose life." That night was long. Sophie stayed awake, watching Claire's fitful sleep, silently praying for strength for them both. In the next room, Amélie also lay awake. Sophie could hear her worried, pacing steps. Morning brought renewed determination. Claire called her NA sponsor, increased her meetings, and together they fortified their support network even further. "I need to confess at the next meeting," Claire decided over breakfast. "About yesterday. About how I almost—" "Are you sure?" Sophie asked gently. "Yes, hiding things, lying, is what got me here in the first place. I need to be honest, especially with myself." The following weeks brought changes in the family's routine. Sophie rearranged her shifts to be more present. Amélie, wise beyond her years, naturally pitched in for simple tasks with the twins. "One day at a time," Claire repeated like a mantra, holding her daughters. "For them, for us." Family therapy intensified. Dr. Martinez introduced communication strategies, ways to handle triggers, and methods to reinforce their familial bonds. "What do you feel when you look at your daughters now?" the therapist asked during one particularly intense session. Claire watched Amélie playing with the twins on the therapy room rug. "Love," she answered simply. But not just love, it's responsibility. Gratitude, sometimes fear. It's like every emotion is sharper, more real. And the cravings. "They're still there," Claire admitted. "I think they always will be. But now I have something stronger to hold on to. I have anchors." Sophie watched her daughter with pride and worry mixed. Claire was stronger, yes, but far from the end of her journey. Each day brought fresh challenges, temptations and fears. One afternoon, while the twins napped and Amélie did her homework, Claire found Sophie in the garden, tending her orchids. "I remember you doing this when I was little," she remarked, sitting beside her mother. "You always said orchids needed patience and constant love. Just like daughters," Sophie smiled. "And like addicts in recovery," Claire added softly. "Mom, thank you for not giving up on me, for giving me a second chance." Sophie set aside her gardening tools, turning to embrace her daughter. "A third, a fourth, as many chances as it takes, my love." We're in this together. And so, through triumphs and setbacks, the Anderson-Durand family continued on their path of healing. It wasn't easy. There were tears, fear, and doubt, but there was also laughter, small victories, and moments of pure joy when Clare was fully present for her children. Recovery was not a straight line, but a winding road of self-discovery and reconnection. With each step, Clare rediscovered not only her sobriety, but her identity as a mother, a daughter, and a woman. One day at a time, she repeated, watching the sunset with her family around her. And this time, the words weren't just an empty mantra, but a promise of love, perseverance, and above all, hope. Sophie's shift at St. Clara's hospital began like any other. Autumn leaves turned red and gold in the hospital garden, a gentle contrast to the sterile white corridors. She was reviewing the previous night's charts, thinking about Clare and the girls at home, when a code blue blared in the ER. Male, approximately 55, gunshot wound, the paramedic announced as the team rushed the gurney down the hallway. Multiple injuries, significant blood loss, dropping pressure. Sophie automatically stepped in to assist, her experienced hands already reaching for gloves. That was when she saw him, the older face, lined with time and now with pain, but unmistakable. The same green eyes Clare had inherited, now half shut in agony. Thomas Laurent. The world seemed to slow down, as if someone had hit the slow-motion button. The man who had taken Clare away from her 20 years ago was now here, fighting for his life under her hands. Fate had a peculiar sense of irony. "Sophie," Elena called, noticing her hesitation. "We need you here." Training took over. Professionalism trumped emotion as she helped stabilize Thomas, each action a battle between duty and memory. "Bullet lodged near the lung," the surgeon noted. "Possible involvement of the pulmonary artery. Significant internal bleeding. We need surgery now." Memories flooded her mind as she worked. It was 1995. Sophie was 16 when she discovered she was pregnant. The positive test shook in her hands as she sat on the cold school bathroom floor, silent tears falling down her too young face. Thomas was a senior, the prodigy boy destined for great things. When she told him, he didn't run like she'd feared. "We'll raise this child together," he promised, his green eyes shining with youthful resolve. "I'll be a brilliant doctor, give our baby everything they deserve." Sophie believed him, how could she not? He was handsome, smart, from a rich, influential family, top of the class, student council president, the one everyone said would go far. It felt like a perfect fairy tale, even if the circumstances were far from perfect. The first months were a whirlwind. Her parents were devastated, the Laurents furious. But Thomas stayed, at least initially. He found a part-time job, spoke of marriage, building a family. Clare was born on a spring morning, her first cries echoing in the same hospital where Sophie now worked. She was perfect, with a dark fuzz on her tiny head and the same green eyes as her father. "My Claire Louise," Sophie whispered, counting tiny fingers. "My little warrior." For a while, it seemed like it might work. Sophie balanced diapers with textbooks, sleepless nights with final exams. Thomas came on weekends, bringing gifts, playing with his daughter. Then, "I got accepted into medical school," he announced one day, eyes shining in a different way. "In Paris." "Paris?" Sophie felt her world crumble. "But what about us?" "That's why I came to talk," he said, avoiding her gaze. "My parents, they have a plan." The plan, as it turned out, was to take Clare from her. "I can't lose this opportunity," he said, custody papers in hand. "Clare deserves more than a teenage mother can give. My parents have connections, can guarantee her future." "She needs her mother," Sophie cried, holding 5-year-old Clare tighter. "You can't do this to us." But he did. With expensive lawyers and family influence, he did. The last day still haunted Sophie's nightmares. Clare in the back of the Laurent car, tiny fists pounding the window, screaming for her. "Mommy! Mommy, don't let them take me." Sophie chased the car until her legs gave out, until her voice was gone from screaming. But it disappeared around the bend, taking her heart with it. "Sophie!" Marie's voice pulled her back to the present. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "In a way, I did," Sophie answered, her voice shaking. They were in the break room, where Sophie had retreated after Thomas was taken to surgery. "That man in the ER, he's Claire's father." Marie sat heavily beside her. "My God, are you sure?" "Positive." Sophie closed her eyes. "How do I tell Claire? She's finally recovering, making progress." "Maybe wait," Marie suggested. "At least until we know if he survives the surgery." "No," Sophie shook her head. "I can't hide this from her. There have been too many secrets already." The surgery lasted 8 hours. Sophie spent that time juggling her hospital duties with anxious calls home, where Amélie was helping care for the twins with the nanny's support. "They're fine, Grandma," Amélie reassured during the last call. "Luna finally fell asleep and Aurora's almost there." When Sophie finally managed a spare moment, she went to Thomas's ICU room. He was unconscious, tubes and monitors everywhere. He looked smaller, more fragile than he had in her memories. "Why did you come back now?" she whispered to the still figure. "Why, after all this time?" As if to answer, Elena arrived at the door with a serious expression. "The police are here. Apparently, the shooting wasn't accidental. They found documents on him. Something about an investigation into drug trafficking." Sophie felt a chill. The same drug ring that ruined Pierre, that nearly destroyed Claire. "Do we need police protection?" she asked, immediately thinking of her granddaughters. "Already arranged," Elena said. "There's a discreet patrol car outside your house and another here at the hospital." Thomas began to wake from the anesthesia late that night. Sophie was checking his vitals when his eyes opened, instantly recognizing her. "Sophie!" His voice was hoarse, disoriented. "Don't strain," she said professionally. "You've had major surgery." "Claire," he whispered, "I need to warn Claire. They're coming." "Who's coming, Thomas?" Sophie asked, suddenly alert. "The Lawrence, they're not who we thought." He struggled to keep his eyes open. "All this time I thought I was protecting her." Sophie carried the news home with a heavy heart. She found Claire on the porch, watching Amélie in the yard with the twins in her arms. "We need to talk," Sophie said softly, sitting beside her daughter. Claire heard the gravity in her voice immediately. "Something happened at the hospital." Sophie took a deep breath. "Your father, Thomas Laurent, was admitted today. He was shot." The ensuing silence was deafening. Claire went pale, her arms instinctively holding the twins closer. "He's alive?" she asked, surprisingly calm. "Yes." "In critical condition, but stable." Sophie hesitated. "Claire, there's more. It seems the shooting is tied to the same drug ring Pierre was involved in." Claire let out a bitter laugh. "It all comes full circle, doesn't it? First Pierre, then me, now him." "You don't have to see him," Sophie assured her. "No one would expect that of you after everything." "No," Claire cut in. "I need to see him. I need to look him in the eyes and understand why he destroyed our lives like that." The visit happened the next day. Sophie accompanied Claire to the ICU, watching her daughter pause at the doorway, hesitant. "Do you want me to go in with you?" Claire shook her head. "I have to do this alone." Sophie stood by the window, observing as her daughter entered the room. Thomas was awake, his eyes widening at the sight of her. "Claire." He tried to move, groaning in pain. "No." Claire raised her hand. "You don't get to call me that, not now, not after 20 years. "Forgive me," Thomas whispered, tears sliding down his aged face. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" Claire laughed bitterly. "By sending me to that boarding school, by separating me from my mother, by making me believe she didn't want me. The Lawrence weren't who I believed they were," Thomas rasped. "When I found out the truth about the family business, about the trafficking, it was too late." "Too late?" Claire's anger erupted. "I was 5. You ruined my life, my mother's life. You threw me into a foreign country with strangers. And I made the biggest mistake of my life," Thomas interrupted, voice breaking. "Not a day goes by that I don't regret it. When I discovered the trafficking and how they used the clinic as a front, I tried to protect you the wrong way." Claire stepped closer to the bed, eyes fixed on his. "Why come back now?" "Because they found out I was gathering evidence," he said, breathing heavily. "Evidence of everything, the trafficking, the clinics, the doctors involved." Another pause, grimacing in pain. "I came to warn you, to protect you and my granddaughters." A heavy silence followed, filled with 2 decades of pain and regret. "I want to be part of their lives," Thomas said finally. "If you'll allow me, I don't deserve it. I know, but—" "It's not that simple," Claire replied, her voice gentler now. "I have 3 daughters to protect. I'm in recovery, trying to rebuild my life." "I know," Thomas nodded. "I only ask for a chance to fix at least a part of what I destroyed." When Claire emerged from the room almost an hour later, her eyes were red, but her posture was different, lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. "He wants to meet the girls," she told Sophie, who had been waiting in the corridor. "Wants to try to be part of our lives." "And what do you want?" Sophie asked gently. Claire glanced at Amélie, who had arrived with the twins, all waiting at the end of the hallway. "Give him a chance," she decided. "Not for him, but for me, for my daughters." She smiled sadly. "For you taught me about second chances, didn't you? When you took me back after everything." Sophie embraced her daughter, feeling how much she'd grown, how much she'd strengthened. The past was there, it always would be, but no longer as a suffocating shadow. It was perhaps a chance for all of them to heal, an opportunity to break the cycle of secrets and pain that had spanned 3 generations. "We'll do it together," Sophie promised, like it should have been all along. And so, in that hospital corridor, 3 generations of a fractured family began forging a new path, a path of forgiveness, healing, and above all, truth. Outside, the sun was setting in pinks and golds, as though nature itself was celebrating this new beginning. And Sophie, watching her reunited family, felt that at last, after so many years, they were all heading in the right direction. Sophie's backyard looked unrecognizable. Colorful balloons danced in the gentle autumn breeze, and a huge banner read, "Happy First Birthday Aurora and Luna." Tables in pastel pink and lavender offered a small buffet, and in the center, a butterfly-topped cake waited for the special moment. "I can't believe it's been a year," Claire said, adjusting Aurora's dress while Sophie finished tying a ribbon in Luna's hair. The twins, identical in their white dresses with colorful sashes, babbled happily. "A year since you arrived with them," Sophie smiled, recalling the stormy night that had changed their lives. "Look how much has changed." Indeed, the changes were apparent in every detail. Claire, now 15 months sober, exuded a serene confidence once thought impossible. Her new job as an art therapist at a rehab center was thriving. She'd found her calling by helping other addicts through art. "Mom," Amélie called from the yard, "my classmates are here." Seeing Amélie run to greet her school friends made Sophie's heart swell with pride. The girl had blossomed over the past year, from a frightened, overburdened child to a bright, sociable kid. Her grades were excellent, and she'd even started ballet lessons, fulfilling a long-held dream. "I need help with the drinks," Marie yelled from the kitchen, ever present in the family's key moments. "I'll get it," Sophie offered, but Claire stopped her. "Let me," she smiled. "You've already done so much putting this all together." Sophie watched Claire leave, noticing how her steps were firmer, her posture more confident. The family support program Sophie had started at the hospital, inspired by her own experiences, was helping dozens of families affected by addiction. "Waiting for someone," Eleanor teased, noticing Sophie glancing at the gate now and then. "Thomas said he'd come," Sophie replied softly. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Thomas appeared, carrying 2 oversized packages. His hair was more grey, and he still limped slightly, a souvenir from the gunshot, but his eyes shone with a peace Sophie had never seen before. "Grandpa!" Amélie ran to hug him, the words sounding natural after months of careful bonding. Thomas's reintegration into the family hadn't been easy. It required many family therapy sessions, painful conversations, and moments of doubt. But he'd proven his remorse through actions, not just words. His testimony had been crucial in dismantling the Laurent drug ring, and his ongoing support for Claire's recovery demonstrated a real commitment to redemption. "Where are the birthday princesses?" he asked, searching for the twins. "Right here," Claire answered, returning to the yard with the babies. A moment of tension lingered. There were still days when the old pain flared, but then she smiled. "Want to hold them?" Thomas gently took his granddaughters, tears welling up when Aurora grabbed his finger. "They're getting so big. They grow fast, don't they?" Sophie commented, her words laden with forgiveness, understanding, and a bridge across 20 years of absence. The party was in full swing when Dr. Santos, the family's lawyer, arrived. His broad grin said everything before he even spoke. "The ruling is out," he announced, handing Claire an envelope. "I thought you'd want to know today." Claire glanced at Sophie, her hands shaking slightly as she took the document. A year of legal battles, psychological evaluations, supervised visits, all culminating in this moment. "Open it," Sophie encouraged gently. With Amelie clinging to her arm and Thomas holding the twins nearby, Claire read. Tears fell before she even reached the end. "The judge," she breathed. "He granted joint custody, you and me, Mom, and regular visitation rights for Thomas." The news sparked hugs and tears of joy. It was more than a legal decision. It was official recognition of what they'd achieved. The broken family was healed. "This calls for a toast," Marie declared, lifting a glass of juice. "To the Anderson Durand-Laurent family in all its complexity." Laughter filled the yard. The twins, as if sensing the importance of the moment, clapped from their little swings. "You know," Sophie said later, once most guests had gone, "sometimes I still pinch myself to make sure this isn't a dream." They were sitting on the porch, watching Thomas push Amelie on the swing while the twins slept in their carriers. "How so?" Claire asked. "All of this," Sophie gestured around them. "You, the girls, this second chance, Gaia. There were so many nights I dreamed you'd come back. And now we're here," Claire finished, taking her mother's hand. "And we're not going anywhere." The family support program Sophie had created at the hospital was flourishing. Families affected by substance abuse not only received medical guidance, but found understanding and hope. Claire often volunteered, sharing her recovery story. "Sometimes," Claire went on, "when I'm at NA meetings, I tell our story. How forgiveness and love can heal even the deepest wounds, and how sometimes we have to lose ourselves to find each other," Sophie suggested. "Exactly," Claire smiled. "You know what Amelie told me yesterday? That our family is like a puzzle that finally fits, even if some pieces are different from what we expected." The sun was setting, painting the sky in pink and gold. The roses Sophie had planted in spring were in full bloom, their scent mingling with the smells of birthday cake and happiness in the air. "For the next birthday," Thomas approached, a sleepy Amelie in his arms, "maybe we could hold it at my new apartment, if you'd like, of course." It was a hesitant offer, testing boundaries, building bridges. "That would be great," Claire replied, her voice carrying the weight of years of hurt turned into acceptance. Sophie looked at her reunited family, imperfect but perfectly imperfect. The locket around her neck, which for so long contained only painful memories, now held a new photo. Claire with all 3 daughters, everyone smiling. "A toast," Sophie lifted her teacup, "to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," they all echoed. And in that moment, under the autumn-colored sky, Sophie knew they had finally found their way home. The journey hadn't been easy, and there would still be challenges ahead. But now they would face everything together, a family rebuilt by love, strengthened by adversity, united by hope. The twins stirred in their sleep, as though they sensed the importance of the moment. Aurora and Luna, born in darkness but destined for light, just like the family around them. A new day was dawning for the Anderson Durand-Laurent clan, and for the first time in a long time, the future shone brighter than the past.